Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Light for Our Democracy event, one of hundreds of events happening across the country tonight to bring people together in reflection, action, and solidarity during the President's address to Congress tonight, March 4. These events are designed to offer peaceful and unified spaces to come together for the health of our democracy, the future of our nation, and the well-being of all its people. Democracy is not just a system of government, it's the power of the people. It begins with us, our voices, and our votes. And we thank you for joining us tonight to learn about how you can care for and defend the rights of people living in our communities. My name is Michelle Whitty, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters for the state of Minnesota, founded in 1919 to further empower voters and defend democracy after the passage of the 19th Amendment, which expanded votes for women. LWV Minnesota is deeply passionate about serving voters through our vibrant nonpartisan organization, committed to civic engagement through the work of 33 community-based chapters with more than 2,300 members here in Minnesota and more than 800 chapters throughout the United States. We are joined this evening by our active and wonderful co-hosts, and we thank them for their long-standing and ongoing advocacy in our state. Common Cause of Minnesota is the first. They're out in the field tonight and at the Capitol, and they are a wonderful sister nonpartisan grassroots organization. Our next partner is Jewish Community Action, a wonderful, bold Jewish voice in Minnesota's movement for economic, racial, and social justice, and the National Council of Jewish Women, a grassroots organization of volunteers and advocates who turn progressive ideals into action. We will share this slide information with you again in our after email because it's great info about what everyone's doing. And our featured partner tonight is the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, here in Minnesota. The ACLU is also a centennial legacy organization founded in 1920 to uphold our civil liberties. Advocating fair treatment for non-citizens has been an important part of the National ACLU's work when it opposed the summary arrest and deportation of Eastern European immigrants during the Palmer raids. Since then, the ACLU and its affiliates have been some of the nation's leading advocates for the rights of immigrants, refugees, and non-citizens. We're so grateful to welcome tonight Carla Esqueda from ACLU Minnesota, who will help us learn more about the rights of immigrants living in our communities, how they can exercise them, and what they should do if their rights are violated. The U.S. Constitution guarantees basic rights and freedoms to all people in the United States, including people who are not U.S. citizens. We'll also have an opportunity to ask questions and learn what actions we can take to better protect our vulnerable neighbors. Tonight's webinar will be conducted with our nonpartisan lens. Being nonpartisan means we do not endorse nor oppose political parties or candidates, but we do study, secure member consensus on, and take action on important issues. Issues themselves are not partisan, and we encourage all voters to become educated about and take action on key issues of concern they have by advocating with their government officials. The first step to advocacy is being informed, and that's why we're excited about our webinar tonight. For our more than 450 registered guests, please know we'll be recording this session and we'll send a follow-up email to you with the link to the recording to share, along with links to resources and actionable steps we can all take to protect our democratic institutions and vulnerable communities at the state and local levels. We're all in webinar mode, meaning your microphone and cameras are off, but you're welcome to share any questions you have in the Q&A section of the Zoom. With only an hour, we'll not likely get to all questions, but I trust you will all be better informed after tonight. So we're going to get started. Carla, welcome again to our Light for Democracy event. We hand it over to you, and we'll look forward to hearing your presentation and having a little dialogue with you afterwards on Q&A. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Carla Esqueda. My pronouns are she, her. I am an organizer with the ACLU of Minnesota, and I primarily work in the greater Minnesota area. So tonight I will be sharing with you a presentation about Know Your Rights, particularly when it comes to ICE and ICE contact. So we'll start a little bit of the presentation as if you were an impacted individual. So this is information that we share with people who are vulnerable to being, caught up in deportation proceedings, who do not have status, or, as we've seen, even people who have status, come into contact with ICE and kind of a what to do. And then we'll move along into what allies can do to kind of help. And so if you are thinking of questions, I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly. And so feel free to jot those down. The only caveat I have is that I'm not an attorney. And so if there are any particularly legal questions, we might have to get back to you on those. But you can always check out our website and our resources for more information. So let me share our presentation. All right. So first of all, some of the key information, if you pick up anything from this, information session at all, it's going to be that you have the right to remain silent. The only caveat with that is that you have to let, the officer know that you are choosing to exercise that right. If all else fails, we want our community to know that they should remain silent and not, cooperate with ICE, or, answer any questions. There's a lot of, tricking that can kind of happen with that. And so we want to make sure that you're exercising the right to remain silent and only talk to an attorney, or, if an attorney is present. Um, we want to let people know that they have the right to refuse to a search of their body, and to a search of their personal property. Um, for example, if you get stopped in a car, you have the right to refuse to have your property searched. A good question to always ask is if you are free to go. If you are stopped and questioned, you have the right to say you don't want to answer any questions, and you can ask if you're free to go. Unless they are arresting you, you should be free to leave. And also, we want to recommend that you don't say anything without having an attorney present. And so Minnesota is one of the states where you do not have to give law enforcement your name. In some other states, you do have to have that requirement to give at least your name. Minnesota is not one of those states, so want to let people know in Minnesota that is not a requirement. When you're in contact with ICE, you just want to make sure that you don't have to answer any questions, but that if you do answer questions, to not lie about your status, or provide any type of false documents. That does come with penalties with immigration. And this is just kind of going over that there are some, exceptions if you are arrested by police. But if anything in the arrest portion, you don't have to provide your name. All right. One section that we'd like to talk about is warrants in particular. There are several different types of warrants. And really only when someone has, ICE has a warrant is when there's a little bit more of a requirement to let them in, or allow them to search, or even arrest an individual. But the reason why I want to talk about warrants is because not all warrants are, created equal, and there's only really one type of a warrant that really counts. So the warrants that we're looking for is a judicial warrant. It's a specific type of warrant that is signed by a judge. So these warrants will have a seal on them. and a judge signature. These warrants are really hard to obtain, and they're usually for a search or for a arrest of a specific person. Um, if it's a search warrant, it's going to be for just a specific address and a specific time. Um, or an arrest warrant will be for a specific individual. There are what's called administrative warrants. These are ICE warrants, for example. They just create these, and they don't really have any weight as far as um, really that you have to do anything that the warrant says. So here we see some pictures of warrants, usually the ones that have the Department of Homeland Security on there are not issued by the court, and you know they're not going to have a signature by a judge. So these warrants aren't really valid. You don't have to open the door, and you don't have to allow for a search with these types of warrants. Um, so you can always let ICE know you're not going to allow them into your home with this warrant. You don't want them, you're not allowing them to search because they're not actually signed by a judge. So this is a image of what a court warrant may look like, and they will have some type of a stamp or seal, and then they will be signed by a judge. These are the type of warrants where ICE does have the authority to come in and look for a specific individual or search, but only for the specific um, evidence or area that's listed. So it's not like an open, they can do anything. They're very specific. And so we always ask that you read through the warrant, which we know is difficult because these warrants are usually going to come in English. And sometimes our communities may not know that. And so we always have them, verify that at least they can confirm. Or we have organizations that they can connect to kind of assist as things are happening. So if ICE comes to your house, the main thing, or the kind of trick that we use is that ICE is kind of like vampires. They can't come in unless you let them in. So never open the door to law enforcement, to ICE. Sometimes they can use local law enforcement to come with them. That doesn't mean that you still have to open the door to them. So we always recommend to not open the door, to always talk to them through the door, through the window, anything closed. And then also to let our, younger children know, because we've seen this happen, unfortunately, is that they come knocking at the door, and they don't usually come in, politely knocking. It's that pounding of the door, let us in type of um, attitude. And sometimes that can be scary, and you are alarmed, and your first reaction might be to open the door. We really train our communities to, as hard as that is, to not, you know, get that urge to open the door, and to let our little ones know to never open the door to anyone that they don't know. And so we want to let them know that they don't have the right to come into the house. You don't give the consent, and ask them if they have a warrant that is signed by a judge. They might, will say, yep, we have a warrant. Keep pressing them. You want to see that actual signature of the judge. Otherwise, like I said, it doesn't count, and they can't come into your home. And then, that, and we know it's difficult, but that address and everything will be listed on there, on that warrant. If for some reason the agents force their way in, or, one of the kiddos or yourself opened the door into your home, unfortunately, now they can come in, and they can start asking questions about anybody that's in the home as far as status. Again, golden rule is to not say anything. and just say, I wish to remain silent and I don't want to speak without having an attorney present. And, just you don't want to give them any information. So, using that is going to be the best course of action at that point. If you are pulled over by ICE or CBP agents, you don't have to open the car door. Again, they can ask you questions. You can say that you wish to remain silent. You can ask if you're free to go. You let them know that you do not consent them for them to search your vehicle. And you don't have to answer questions if you're a passenger in there. Again, it's usually unless if they have a very specific warrant for a arrest. So we also talk about what to do if ICE comes to your work. Um, ICE in times can come to a work if they have permission from your employer, from the owner, to come. Usually, they might be doing like an e-verify type of thing, where they're confirming with the employer to see if they're e-verify compliant, that types of things. If ICE comes into your place of work, golden rule, don't say anything. Sometimes what we have seen or heard of what happens is that ICE will come into a place of work and people are scared and right away they come in and say, everyone who has legal status, stand over here. Everyone who doesn't have legal status, go stand over there. And then people break up. We want to say and let our community know that that's a ploy, it's a trick. You don't have to kind of do what you're told. You don't have to move in a certain way, and you don't have to answer really kind of any questions. So the best course of action is to stay calm and let them know that you don't consent to a search of yourself as well. If this is happening at a workplace, we always recommend that people take out their phones, videotape what is happening, so that we are able to have, if any um, constitutional rights are being violated, then we have that to go off of to use in court if we need to. Again, golden rule, stay silent, say you wish to remain silent, and just to know you don't have to answer questions um, at any point. We also want our communities to be prepared if they are in danger of deportation. We've, have already seen cases kind of throughout the state where people have been picked up. And so we want our families to be as prepared as they can be, kind of as, a worst case scenario. So we want them to have important information written down where either friends or family have access to that in case they are picked up, that then they can be located through the ICE detention. Um, Here it gets kind of a bit, you are required to have your green card with you at all times, but we know sometimes if people leave it in their lockers, things like that, documents like that have been stolen. So you can carry, a copy, things like that, if you would like to kind of ensure that your card is safe, things like that. It's best if people have an immigration attorney before they have any contact with ICE. Once you're in a detention center, it's a bit harder. You're kind of playing catch up. But if you have an immigration attorney on retainer, it's easier for them to locate you and also advocate for you if you need to. Having things like a power of attorney or DOPAs, which is a delegation of parental rights authority, is also good to have. Powers of attorney are useful, for example, if you own a home or if you own property, cars. If for some reason you are deported and you would like to have that property sold or taken care of, you want to leave that with somebody through a power of attorney so that it's not just lost, because we sometimes people lose the property then at that point. The delegation of parental authority, if people that don't have status, have children who are US citizens, are making the choice to leave the US citizen children behind and not take them with them. Setting up a DOPA is useful so that someone else can be, in charge of the children for the time being. And, we do have clinics that are running these types of assistance as times go by. So if you use the QR code, there is an option for the DOPAs. A DOPA, the delegation of parental authority, is something that you can do on your own. You can just fill it out. The only portion that you don't fill out is a signature piece, which does have to be in front of a notary public, but you could go to a bank or find a notary public to just, do that signature piece to make it valid. Power of attorneys are, do have to go through an attorney. Like I said, we're in coalition with a lot of organizations that are trying to bring services like that to community who, would use these types of services. All right, so now we get into the section as far as what you can do if you're an ally and you are wanting to do work to protect your community members. And here's where I usually say, we're giving you permission to be your best caring self. Usually that's a bad thing, but in this instance, use that energy to really protect your community. And so we can do that in several different ways. And we've seen it being used in different ways. And it's very, very effective. So one thing that we do is if you see ICE, is to draw attention, to follow them. So if they're in public, or even in a residential area, you can go up to them, you can go up to their vehicles, you can ask them why they're there, you can ask them if they have a warrant. You can, be that person to just ask the questions, record what is happening, record where you are, take a note of the time, and everything that is around you. You could say, I'm at X location or X cross street. It is such and such time. Here's where ICE is. And I know Papa is going to be on the call later, so I will let them talk about their hotline, which is great. We do get asked sometimes if you are part of like a nonprofit or if you have a business or an organization, and what are your rights as far as ICE. So employers have what's called the reasonable expectation of privacy. Um, so if you have a lobby, if that's the public area of your business per se, your organization, you can always ask them why they're there, record, do all that stuff. Just really, do those pieces to discourage them from being at your location. But you do have what's different as known as like your private areas. So if you have a lobby, but then you have offices, or, you're a restaurant and you have, your lobby where people can dine in, but then you have your kitchen. So anywhere where the public normally would not go, you can prevent ICE, prohibit ICE from going into those spaces. Those are private spaces. And unless they have a warrant for your location, for that area, you can ask them to leave. If they're violating this, then definitely record everything that's happening, because then that would be a violation. Our key pieces about remaining silent, again, our golden rule. And here's where we would normally, if we were in person, do like a role play activity. I'll just go over some quick ways that we've seen people being able to prevent ICE or block ICE activity from happening. They're hitting a lot of different cities and in different states. Letting people know about what their rights are is very important. If we see ICE happening, kind of, again, I'll probably, if I see ICE agents, I'd probably go right straight, right up to the ICE agents, start recording, ask them why they're there, ask them if they have a warrant, start, recording my area. We have seen in other locations where they have come into a neighborhood and, we're going to go into an apartment building and we're knocking on doors, and people were asking people, do you know if your neighbor has status, this types of things. We have seen people go out to those areas, even with like megaphones out into the street. If you're in a street, if you're in a public area, you have the right to record. You have the right to record what's happening. You have the right to ask questions. You can start, we've seen people out with megaphones, yelling outside of buildings. You have the right to remain silent. Don't open your door unless they have a warrant. Letting people know what their rights are is always the best defense that we can use against ICE. And we've seen a lot of times it's, you know, once they've been kind of made in a sense that they don't want to be there anymore because, they know that you're going to be advocating, letting people know, hey, don't talk to them. You don't have to speak to them. And so that really prevents and can, protect our vulnerable communities that could get picked up. And just want to make sure I have my time. Um, so we do have all this information online as well. We have Know Your Rights cards that are, you can print out. We have several different Know Your Rights at the ACLU of Minnesota information sheets. This is kind of a Know Your Rights with ICE, but we do have Know Your Rights as far as like if you have contact with police, if you're a student. I know I didn't touch a lot on if ICE comes to your school. We've been doing a lot of work with schools, and we do have that information as well. It's what your rights are if you're a student. We also do have information on like Know Your Rights LGBTQ, all of the different pieces that we touch on. All of that information is free and available on our website as well. And so I will let Michelle come back and see if we have any questions.
Great. Thanks so much. You can stop sharing your screen, Carla, so we can see you, and look forward to asking questions. I'm actually going to kind of kick it off here with one general clarification that I get asked a lot about, which is basically the rights you're talking about. These are rights afforded people by the U.S. Constitution or state statute, correct? It's not as though these are like some special rights for our undocumented. These are, everyone's given these rights here.
Right. Yep. So these are constitutional rights, and the Constitution says that as long as you are physically present in the United States, you are afforded all of the constitutional rights. So it doesn't differentiate what your legal status is. Those constitutional rights are yours, and any violation of those rights is something that we take very seriously. So if those violations are happening, we want to know about them. And so connecting with us is, is a way that we can kind of stop these things from happening. And so I know it gets a little tricky, but there's, criminal law, immigration law, and we're somewhere in the middle, which is known as civil law. And that's where your constitutional rights are. And that's the type of law we defend.
Oh, that's a great explanation. Thank you. Well, great information, very helpful and empowering. I know we have a lot of questions, so I've asked Sam Strukins, our Civic Engagement Director, now to share some of the questions that have come up from our audience.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you so much, Carla. We have quite a few questions in the chat, so we'll see if we can get to as many of them as possible. First question, are ICE agents generally in uniform and identifiable? How about their vehicles?
Yeah, this one is tricky. So there's no requirement that they are that they have to be in uniform or that they have to use marked cars. Normally, you do see them in some type of uniform with like an ICE um, labeling, or with their if their vehicles, and they'll have government plates, and they're federal government plates, which is different than like the state government plates. So take a look at the plates. That might be a tip if they're a government plate, but there is no requirement. So always asking that question if they identify themselves as ICE, asking for a badge, asking for a badge number. Again, remaining silent is the golden rule.
Yeah, thanks for that. Next question relates to schools. Can ICE question school children or school authorities in schools? And similarly, what happens if ICE shows up, and what would the school administrator have to do? Would they have to let them in, or what rights would they have?
Yeah, so I mean, students have protections as well under the FERPA law, which does afford them privacy protections. We're working with states all across, schools all across the state, and most of them are coming up with an ICE plan. They will not be letting ICE in. There are caveats if they have a specific warrant for a specific individual, but they don't have carte blanche to just walk into the school. But best case scenario is to let your students know, or to let admin know that they don't have to speak with ICE. They don't have to give any information. Um, and the requesting an attorney is key.
Okay, yeah, and I know I've seen schools working with their attorneys and seeking legal support. So that's great to know. Okay, changing gears here. What about at jobs? If you are a witness to someone, to ICE removing someone from a job, can you go up to ICE or the person being detained and ask why, and talk to the person who is being detained by ICE?
So if ICE is coming into your workspace, my best recommendation is to take out your phone, start recording. You might want to take a little bit of limit of getting too close, because any type of interference with an arrest, that can get a little bit, you can't interfere in an arrest, but you certainly can ask questions. You certainly can videotape at a distance. You can let the individual know. You don't have to answer their questions. Ask for an attorney. Let him, saying out loud what the rights are is important. We just want to take note of the proximity, just so that you don't get into any issues of interfering with an arrest.
Okay. Um, Also good to know. Next would be sort of if that person is arrested, and I don't know if you're a member of the community or a family member, how do we find out about proceedings at local immigration courts? Where might that be available?
This is where the prep piece is really important. Having people know if you are if you have any type of status, you have connection at all with immigration, you're going to have what's known as an A number. Having an A number is very important, because you can track even through the website where a person is detained. If they get moved to a different facility, you're able to locate them. If you don't have any type of an A number, having exact spelling of name, date of birth, that information is still important, because that's what you're going to use to try to locate your family member, loved one, friend through the system.
Okay. And are those immigration courts all over the state, or are there certain ones where most of cases are heard here in Minnesota?
Um, Immigration detention centers, there's usually some type of detention center in states. However, for example, in Minnesota, there's 3 different locations where they can house um, people for ICE, but they don't have a lot of beds. So what happens if there's a big raid or something, they might get moved to a facility in another state that's just bigger and has more bed capabilities. But usually you should be able to locate who has federal contracts to hold people for ICE.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have seen some of that information. We will be sharing some of the resources. Again, as you mentioned, Carla, people can follow ACLU, but we'll be sharing this out to all the attendees as well. Um, but okay, do you know much about other states? There's a question, and there might be people here from outside of Minnesota, um, relating to laws versus in another state. Do you know? Um, Providing names, the question relates to, I might have missed this, but how do we find out which states require you to provide names versus don't require that? I'm not really sure what that is referring to.
Yeah. So, so in Minnesota, you're not required to give enforcement your name, but in other states, there is that requirement. Looking up your, the statutes in your state, you could do a Google search that should take you to your state's, statute, and you should be able to find if that is a legal requirement in your state or not.
Okay, great. And I know you probably have other partners, other state partners you work with, and we'll be sharing more information in the slides after this for people who want to learn more. And like you mentioned, we'll have some information from Gopal. Okay, so this question maybe just gives you a chance to talk about the resources you have, but presentation was obviously in English, but I see on your website that you have resources in multiple languages, and I guess yeah, I mean, do you have all that and are you able to give this presentation in other languages as well?
Yeah. So we have the Know Your Rights informations that are available to print through our website, ACLU National. So the good thing is that, we're the state affiliate, but we do have a national page. But even on our state affiliate page, we do have Know Your Rights in several different languages that are printable. You can have them at any time. As far as videos go, we do have some Know Your Rights videos in Spanish. And I know, for example, my colleague did a Know Your Rights presentation this morning, and it will be dubbed into Korean, the Korean language. And so we are expanding on that. And I would say make the request because we want to get this information out to as many people. And we're more than willing to, get the information out in other languages if need be.
Great. Uh, yeah, thank you all for the resources you provide and communicating nationally as well. For those of you who aren't from Minnesota, go to your ACLU in your other state. Okay, next question, and we're kind of running out, so if anyone has any more questions, feel free to drop them in. Okay, what about phones? If somebody has a phone in their pocket, is that, can that be searched? Do you know much about that? Can facial recognition be used to get into that person's phone? Do you know anything about that?
So your phone is considered your private property, and you don't have to consent any type of search or give them the password to your phone. We do always recommend, if possible, not to use the facial recognition portion. Instead, use a code so that your phone is only accessible through the code. But they don't have access into your phone. That is your private property. They do need a warrant to access that information.
Okay. Very, very helpful. What about census requests? Is that something that pertains to your work and that you know about in terms of immigration?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I guess I think I need a little bit more, give you a little bit more context, but we'll move on and might come back to that one. Uh, can non-ICE local law enforcement detain you over your immigration status?
So this gets a little bit tricky. There are what's called these forms that you can fill out and request. They're called a 287G. So far, there are no 287Gs signed in the state of Minnesota, which means no law enforcement, local police, or sheriff can ask you any type of immigration questions, and you don't have to answer those. But there are some states that do have contracts, these 287Gs signed, that, in a sense, deputized, and these are for the most part sheriff's offices that deputize themselves through ICE that could act as ICE enforcement. My recommendation would be to check to see if your local sheriff office has a 287G that is signed. We do advocate to community to let your local city police departments and sheriff's departments know that you don't want them working with ICE. A lot of these times people, they work in elected positions. And so letting them know that you as a constituent or as an organization really don't want that connection to happen. And if there are, definitely you can advocate and work together to ensure that Sheriff's Department breaks their 287G contract. So they're not required to, but they can choose to do it.
Okay. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, next question, and we have a few more here. What about like kind of large raids that we've seen ICE making? Where do they target? I mean, how do we know, or do we know like where ICE is going to show up? Are they like tracking places where they think they can find people to detain? Do you know like sort of their strategy at all?
I can't say that that I know what the strategy is with them. We know that we'll probably see most of the attacks happen in areas that they're unfortunately politically targeting to make a splash. But that's the important thing is that in places like Chicago and in Denver, they've been very inefficient because different organizations, nonprofits, have been able to blanket community with these know your rights um, um, information to kind of prevent as many people getting swept up as possible. We've seen how effective it is, and I think that coming from that space of not always just having fear, but empowerment to know that this is actually working in real time. Letting people know about their rights is a very, very effective way to keeping them safe. And so knowing what to do when that happens, um, we're seeing it play out and have really positive benefits.
Wonderful. Yes, I really enjoyed this presentation, and I hope everyone else has too. Um, Next, what about lawyers and representation? Can somebody who is a non-lawyer like get trained to offer pro bono representation if that's something you know? And similarly, where do people find lawyers? Does ACLU provide representation for folks?
So here's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? When I talked about the different type of laws, there's criminal law, there's immigration law, and then there's civil law. So let's say, for example, and we've seen this happen. We've taken cases on this before. That I'm out at a mall, for example, ICE comes to me because I'm having a conversation in Spanish and starts asking me about my status, right? So right there, they've violated my rights. By assuming that I don't have status, maybe based on the color of my skin and the fact that I'm speaking Spanish for whatever reason. So the ACLU can pick up cases like that because now they have violated my constitutional rights, but it would be a civil lawsuit. Let's say I didn't have status and I get picked up, right? So then now I'm in to do different things. They can still help me because they did violate my rights by assuming I didn't have status, but I don't have status. So now I'm caught in the immigration system. And for that, I would need an immigration attorney. Um, or let's say, for example, I'm in some type of criminal proceeding, right? I would need a criminal attorney, which, thankfully, with the criminal side of it, you are required, the government is required to provide an attorney to you. So you have something like a public defender available to you. Unfortunately, with immigration law, there is no requirement for the government to provide an attorney for you. So you do have to go out on your own. Um, Immigration law is only next in complication to tax law. So while there are some limited things that you could do, like help people fill out DOPAs, or connect, people to power of attorneys, things that can be done, it's a little bit more difficult to help someone with like an asylum case or a refugee case. For that, getting immigration attorneys connected is the best solution.
Well, thank you for that
And if
answer.
your civil rights are violated, definitely connect with your local ACLU. Any case that we pick up is pro bono, so we never charge any of our clients.
Oh, wow. Did not know that. Well, yeah, thank you again. A couple more questions, kind of following up. In Minnesota, there was a recent judicial decision about saying that cars are not considered private property. Does that mean anything towards your presentation about someone being able to, or if you were stopped and being able to search your car without a warrant? Do you know that was just a very recent decision?
That would be one for the attorneys. I'll make sure I get the answer back to you and we can pass along the information.
Okay. Thank you. And then back to businesses. So say maybe a place where, ICE is targeting, or maybe they think there are people there um, who are because of their immigration status. The business, what do they have to do to let them in? I mean, do you know like if do they need a name for the business to let them into that place of employment?
Yeah, what you're looking for is those judicial warrants again. So the name of the specific person. If you don't see a judicial warrant, if it's not signed by a judge, if you don't see that your location is listed or specific person is listed, ask them to leave. Record everything that's happening because if they're approaching people just to approach them, they're infringing on those rights. And if they're attempting to go into a private area of your business, that is also an infringement um, on your rights, and they don't have access to that unless they have that judicial warrant. So record, document everything that's happening, ask for those warrants, always asking them to leave.
Okay. Thank you. And questions keep coming in, but I think we're going to have to pass them along to you later and get back to people. Just a quick question I have is when you do record that, where do you do with it? Do you send it to a news site or yeah, what do you do with it?
Yeah, so it can vary. I know Ryan will be talking next, and they have a hotline that they're using. So check with your state. A lot of ACLUs and across the country are in coalitions and working. Either they have a hotline or one of their partners has a hotline. You'll still want to retain that because if, for example, there's a violation that's happening, lawyers can then use your recording in as evidence to help support their cases in court. So connect with organizations if they have a hotline so that one, they can know what's happening and they have that visual, documentation. And two, because if we need that as proof, as evidence when we're doing our cases to kind of launch cases against ICE for those rights violations. So keeping that video and giving it to people that are affected or picked up is useful. Or even if they don't pick up, if you record a violation happening, that's something that maybe then we can go back to those people and say, hey, obviously your rights were violated. Would you want us to do a lawsuit on your behalf? Having that evidence.
Okay. Yeah, I hate to cut off this Q&A, but okay, one last question. What happens, sorry, what if ICE picks up someone who does have legal status? What should we expect?
Yeah. So if you have status and you are picked up by ICE, your rights were violated, right? Usually they have to have a reasonable doubt for you to not have status. And if you're, um, you know, at that point, once you're detained, you would be verified as far as what your identity is. And it does happen. So they verify your identity. They do hold you for a while, depending on how long. Again, there might be more infringements that happen. But once you are released, getting in contact with a civil, an attorney that does civil law is going to be your next step to ensuring that they're held accountable for any violations that they make.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carla, for answering those questions very clearly and insightfully. And we'll be sharing out the recording and resources for more people to get their questions answered. Michelle, do you just want me to go in now to answer?
Yeah, I I just want to provide a little summary and then we'll wrap up, but I'll have you talk about Copal. But I do want to say how useful this has been Carla, too, about understanding the difference between civil, criminal, and immigration law. Understanding that civil law, it's my understanding too that they don't have to Mirandize people. But I think a couple of things I heard for us as we get into actions that, we don't want to get in the way of an arrest or further hurt anyone, right? First, do no harm. We can warn people about and tell them their rights, but we don't want to interfere. And I really think this 287G idea of local communities being able to talk to their sheriff departments and see where we all fit in providing a safe and welcoming community. So those are really good ones. So that's a lead in. I'm going to have Sam take us through some of the advice from Copal and some of the ways to continue to take action through the league, and then I'll wrap it up.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. And so, yeah, I spoke with Gopal, and they shared some information with me. And some of you might have also seen or might already be involved with them here in Minnesota. But Gopal, Communities Organizing Latina Power and Action, and the Immigrant Defense Network, IDN, are mobilizing community members, immigrant rights advocates, and local leaders to protest the escalating attacks on immigrant workers and their families. And that is what for today. I'm just listing out some steps that how we can get involved. We know our rights now, and we can support legal defense work, but also joining Copal and IDN. The IDN provides trusted information, legal resources, and direct action and support, including more opportunities to do trainings with simulations as to what would happen if ICE were to come to your workplace or school or wherever in the community. And now is the time for us to act, to unite, and to ensure a future of justice, dignity, and respect for all. And so these are some resources for you all, and then I will share some more here. I would recommend if you wanted to take a picture of this page. We mentioned earlier the hotline, which you can call if you feel like someone's rights are violated or you want to report something that you saw in the community pertaining to immigration or ICE enforcement, and wanted to let them know. It's available in English and Spanish. And if you wanted to get involved to volunteer to support their work, please visit copalmn.org. And we, again, will be working with them to maybe offer some other trainings, or you can find more resources from them to get involved. And I also listed out some places where you can get more information. I've seen a few of you mention the red cards from the Immigration Legal Resource Center, and you can find them on that website, and you can also find them at the ACLU website. I'm sure any ACLU website has them, but here in Minnesota, you can visit and get that information from them. And Michelle, if you can maybe close us out, but LWVMN and our sponsors tonight, we are involved in getting people engaged and providing resources and opportunities to make our voices heard. That includes getting informed tonight and sharing this presentation with others. But if you wanted to make your voice heard on other issues in the community, or find out about court decisions, executive actions, please go to our website and also subscribe to our weekly capital letter to stay up to date on what's happening with our government. And yeah, we'll also be sharing other resources from nonpartisan partners, similar lifting up ACLU communications and others that we should be knowing about in the community. So I'll pass it off to you, Michelle.
All right, thank you. So if you are visiting us from another state, the good news is every state has a League of Women Voters and an ACLU chapter. So we really right now need everybody on the front line in this important work. So we want to thank the ACLU, continue to support organizations like our partners tonight, Common Cause Minnesota, also a national organization, and National Council of Jewish Women and Jewish Community Action. Become part of networks that are really driving change right now. That is, it may seem like a little thing to do, but it is a big thing to do because we are working together to mobilize people, to educate people like here, like you were tonight. We know that our need will grow. So thanks for using your voice. Remember, you all have your own town square. Somewhere you are an influencer. You may not be Taylor Swift, but you have power that you probably don't even know you have in your own families, communities, places of worship, to be a caring, knowledgeable person, to be able to have difficult conversations if that's required, and to get people to plug in right now. So please do, again, I want to end with my favorite quote. I just, on nights like this, want to always remember the Honorable Civil Rights Leader and Congressman John Lewis as my guiding light as we use our light tonight. One of his great quotes is, "Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. And each one of us in every generation must do our part." So thank you all for doing your part tonight. A special thank you again to Carla Esqueda and the ACLU for being on the front line of defending the rights of and supporting our immigrant neighbors. So thank you all. Stay strong, and good night. We will email you all with all of these resources as well. Thank you. Take care.